And then there are two cases that are apparently related. 22 PSB 2629 and 22 PSB 4215. I assume those two are related cases, Captain,
Let me just a second.
based on the description.
And what was it, 2629?
2629 and 4215, they're about,
They are not related.
what it says on this, the reason it says related to previous texting case, is that related to the other texting case we had?
Sorry.
Okay.
That is not clear, but yes, that is from previous texting case that you reviewed.
Okay.
Is that a case that we have already discussed tangentially at least?
So I don't think that it,
Yeah.
I don't know if it was, here's the deal, go ahead.
Yeah, when you guys reviewed the full texting case, this one was ongoing, but it was part of it.
So it's closed now?
It's closed now.
So we can review it?
Absolutely.
Right, okay, well, we don't, the reason I was linking them is because I thought that it was linked to 2629, but it's not, so,
4215.
4-2, yeah, 1-5.
One's internal and the other's external.
Yeah.
right.
And so, but yeah, so 2629, they're separate, but the one where we said related was to the prior one. Sorry, I should have made that clear.
Right. That's all I had. Anybody else have any others?
Did you want that one then?
Yes.
Odell wants 4215, so.
Yes.
I had a question on the staff report.
Okay.
And Travis, I don't know if we need to wait for executive session, but was there some kind of scandal in the Records Bureau? I mean,
For-
15 civilian employees being investigated in a month?
So what the, I don't, so last month, and that's part of what we talked about, I'll backtrack a little bit, with the niche system not having been in place for a certain amount of time, they're now starting to go through and do corrective measures with citation errors, things that are being entered in incorrectly, that somebody has to go back and review, and they're catching on that. And so I think last month we had 20-some, and you're probably going to see that for a few months while they're doing the coaching and mentoring on the clerical errors that are getting put in. That's
Okay.
where it's at.
And the civilian employees, they're not subject to these policies, are they?
Yes.
They are, okay.
So I have some questions or maybe suggestions for clarifications. Under findings, let's just look at 21 PSB 6418. Like, these are sustained, but it doesn't say what the consequences or anything were. If it was coaching and mentoring or suspension.
So if it's a coaching and mentoring only, it will say that.
Right.
If it says sustained,
That was my error.
Oh, okay.
I added where it says under 22 PSB 1369, it's one highlighted in green. I put the type of discipline that was on there.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, I am hand doing these reports. So that's just an oversight on my part.
Oh, okay.
But they were sustained for those violations.
Right, so they were sustained, but suspended then?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
no, they could have received a written reprimand.
Oh, okay. And then on the suspension, when you're preparing that, can you see how long they were suspended? And is it permanent? Was it a day or
I
maybe?
can't see how long they were suspended for. I don't know if I can put it in this report, though.
and somebody please speak up if they know this, but my thought on the actual, like, day suspension, the number of days suspended, what the actual discipline was, other than one of the four things, I think would be an executive session if a case is picked, but somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that, I don't know.
Sure.
I would think, the fact that there was a suspension is, suspension or reprimand or something like that. The details, I think we could say for executive session. Probably. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Well, I think I don't know. I mean, I think, one of the things that I'm sensitive to and looking for is what may be perceived as, the right word isn't coming, but like favoritism. Some people get off easier than others, and if we have to pull these to look at that, I'm happy to do that. And so like if there's, let's see here. So 23 PSB 0564, it's close to the bottom. It's just up 5 or 6 or 7 from the very last page. But this person was driving with a suspended license, and they just got coaching and mentoring. And then 22 PSB 4766, this person was driving on a suspended license, and they were suspended. Or, yeah, they had a suspension. So, it's kind of inconsistent.
I'm looking for, where's 4766? Is it up from it?
It's the fourth one up from the bottom of the first page.
Right. Of the first page?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I get what you're saying. So without going into the investigation itself, then, because it could be that it was a second violation. There could have been progressive discipline on say a month or 2 months ago. There could have been something prior. There was a coaching and mentoring. And then now that there has been progressive discipline, there was a...
There's also a difference between a civilian versus a commission, because civilians don't get department vehicles, whereas the commission do.
But without, I don't know if we'll be able to tell that from this, is where I'm just not sure. Because you're right, they will say different things. I just don't know, even if we were to put, say, the amount of days, without having more context, I don't know that helps you decipher whether something's being fairly doled out or not.
Well,
Because you could see the same violation 5 times, 5 separate instances, and they all 5 could be different. And it wouldn't necessarily tell you from here whether it was fair or not on how they did it.
Well, that's
Does that
true,
make
but
sense?
if one's a 30-day suspension and one's a 1-day suspension, like we, as a board, may be interested in like, oh my gosh, what happened that gal got 30 days?
I do understand, yeah, I understand that. And I think the other thing that would be hard from this is when you have the prior month like that, we also honestly have to go in and look at prior discipline to see whether there was a progression there. And that would have to be done for each month's summary, to go back and look and see whether there was prior discipline. And on some of those, you could have, even if, say, it ends up in a B that's a written reprimand, you might have had 2 or 3 coaching and mentorings prior to that. To get that all into one area there on one employee could be tough. So.
Maybe relevant as to why the license was suspended too, I suppose.
Do we pick separately subcommittee? Or how are we going to decide what gets looked at in the subcommittee versus here?
Well, we're just going to have a discussion, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, all right.
Agenda
Well,
item.
then, maybe I guess my selections then may be based then on whatever that discussion is.
But I thought that we'll get the next agenda on, but I thought we identify cases, those that appear to be more serious or those appear to be external where the person has asked for review, we would just automatically go to full board. And then we would just select some number of the cases we've identified to go to a subcommittee. And anybody here can make that suggestion. Anybody else have other cases they want to call? Well,
First, I'd like to thank the captain for more detail on the explanation. I know that takes a little more wordsmithing, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Very nice of you. I wanted to follow up on that 4215 on the first page. It says that this is related to the previous texting case. Did I miss something in your explanation? Is this or is this not related to the racial statements?
Yes.
Yes.
It is?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we're going to look at that, correct?
yes.
Excellent. And I ask if we could look at 1369, excessive use of force.
That's on the list, Walt.
Yeah.
Good, okay. and 2678, is that on the list?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So my question has to do with, it says it's sustained but then suspended. How long are the suspensions?
We just talked about that.
So that's what we were just talking about. That's a question that we're going to have to figure out, is whether we go through and put the amount of days and whether that helps this board or it doesn't. Because like I said, you could have 5 instances of general duties, right? And they're 5 separate officers, and I'm not going to ascertain from this if one says 5 days, one says 1 day, one says 3, what the details of that case were that made those suspensions different. You're also not going to have the context here, and there's no way to put it here, of prior discipline or progressive discipline that got to that. This will never give you that. I'm not saying that we can't just put the days of suspension there. That's probably something that we would be able to do. I think it's information we could have. There's 2 questions. Is that something that can go in this public session on the amount? I don't know that it identifies anybody, so I don't know that it couldn't, right? And then, does that help you as a board?
It's a practical matter. All these cases that Walt just mentioned are been pulled for review, and so we will get the number of days
Yes.
as part of that packet, and we will get the prior history as part of that packet. So the
Yes.
board will have the information on any case pulled for review.
Yes, sir.
And as a practical matter, we tend to pick cases where a suspension has been entered. I mean, those tend to be more serious cases. So not every time, obviously, but that tends to be one of the criteria because it flags it as a more serious case.
What I'm hearing is that it varies, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so who decides? Is it state in PD policy, and every captain will follow that policy, or is it just basically on a case-by-case basis?
It's on a case-by-case basis. The facts surrounding the case, and then as the supervisors review it and provide the facts, the suspension time, the number of days, is decided by the deputy chief and the chief.
But there's also a matrix in your regulations that identify, I guess, guidelines for
Yes,
for the
regulation
number of days.
2.2, I think is what it is. It outlines for this, okay, so the violations are listed A, B, C, D, E, F, right? And it lists on an A violation, a first offense can be a verbal reprimand, second offense, written reprimand, and then it progressively goes up. For like a D violation, first offense is like, I want to say 3 to 5 day suspension. Second one is 5 to 15. And on an E offense, first violation is a 15-day suspension. So on some of these, if you were to look at it and you see that it was a D or an E associated and you see suspension, you can automatically assume that it's at a minimum what those are. And in the allegations and directives that we gave you, I don't know that it has the discipline code in there, but that's also something that you can view online, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the policies that have.
Captain, are these with pay or without? If you're suspended, it's with pay or not?
No, if you're suspended, it's without pay.
Pardon?
If you're suspended, it's without pay.
Without, thank you, sir.
Travis, how is it decided which deputy chief is going to sign off on it?
Typically by the division. So if it's a field employee, meaning a patrol officer or traffic section, it's the field services deputy chief. Investigations would be the investigations deputy chief. Support services, meaning anything that doesn't fall in the other two, would be the support services deputy chief.
Is there a reason the chief doesn't sign off anymore?
He signs off. Now whether he physically signs it or not, I don't know. When it gets back to PSB, I don't know if there's an actual signature on it or not, but the chief authorizes those suspension days.
If he doesn't sign it, how do you know he authorized it?
How do I personally know? I don't.
No, how does anybody know?
I mean, because we believe in what they say that, the deputy chief has said the chief has authorized this. or concurred with their decision.
Okay.
And that's my best answer for you, I mean, to be honest. Without having seen, and honestly, with the new chief, I haven't seen very many of these, so I don't know what the sheets look like as they go back to PSB. I'm sure as I start getting through some of these cases, I'll find that out. But that is the answer is, we have to take the word for it that the chief has concurred with what the deputy chief's decision is. Meaning when it comes down to me to hand out the discipline, and I get the notification PSB, that is what I assume.
So on this discipline matrix that, say the range you said like is 5 to 15 for a certain penalty, is that a recommendation, or do they have to follow that? Can they say, oh, well, we're going to do 4 days instead, and then it's just going to be 4, or do they have to follow that minimum of 5?
So it's a guideline.
Okay.
Chief or the deputy chief have the ultimate authority to stray from that if they choose to. Now, you also get back into play with the FOP, contract things and stuff like that, grievances, but yes, they can.
Yeah, so they could stray for, so we really can't assume then that if we say that this is what the allegation is, and then the finding is sustained, and then we see that it's this 5 to 15, we really can't assume that it really was in there, because they can.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good point.
But if you
Wouldn't they reclassify the level of violation
So
to correspond with the number of days?
So if it started out as a D violation, but the ultimate finding was a B, then it will come as the finding of a B.
Yeah.
To be honest, and I apologize, I just don't have enough experience with it to be able to tell you whether that occurs very often or it doesn't, or historically, how often that ever happens.
I think the key is if we pull it for review, we do know.
Yes.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
And we get to see the whole history of each officer and so on with that when we pull it.
Any other questions?
For clarification, now in 3 different places here, 21 PSB 3210, first page, third one down. So allegation is contact with citizen, but then the complaint is from an internal employee. So bear with me. And then on the second page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8th or 9th up from the bottom, similar. 23 PSB 0062 and 0064, contact with citizen, but then it's about their interaction with other departmental employees. So they hit different, right? If it's really.
Give me those again, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. 0062, 0064, from the bottom up, I don't know, 7 or 8.
I got you. And what is the question?
Okay, well, contact with citizen, third column, but over in the description, they're coached and
About their
mentored
actual
about departmental employees, right? So they hit different. So I would probably want to pull those 2.
And Keely, help me out here, is that something that on the allegation type, that there's something that falls under the different directives?
The contact with citizen.
Yeah.
If my memory is serving me correctly, I believe that 23 PSB 0062 and 0064, I believe 2 employees were quarreling with each other over something, whereas the one on the first page that Tyler had mentioned, 310, was where an employee called animal services for something regarding a work-related matter, and that officer was ultimately raped and unpunished.
Do we know why then the allegation or on the on the allegation, on those ones, it ended up with contact with citizen.
I'd have to do more digging on that.
Well, I would pick those three for subcommittee, if we can do that.
That's fine.
So 6.2, 6.4, and
3210.
3210, and just mark that down. We do that one in the subcommittee review.
Yeah.
Any other cases? Any other staff report questions? Captain, it's not part of the staff, but Walt had asked, and I told him we would check on whether or not we could do a short update on the status of the traffic stop information, and you were going to check and see if that was available today. Did you can you tell us if that's something we can do?
so did you talk to, or you text with Brian earlier? Did you talk to him, Walt?
Yeah, he called this afternoon. You want to give us the update?
So
No.
what the update is that what you've been talking with him about on how to tweak some of that stuff, Richard's still working on that. We plan on having stuff ready again and prepared to go back for the, like we talked about in March, or set it as an agenda item and come back and go over all the stuff we talked about.
I thought in March that if it's ready, and I hope it is, that we would have a significant agenda item devoted to that traffic stop data, where the department could make a presentation of the information, and then we would ask the department, the chief or his designee or whatever, to discuss what the department thought of it and what they might think would be appropriate for addressing any issues identified. And so that would be a significant then agenda item for that day. That would be my plan if the data is ready.
We'll have something, what you've been talking about, we'll have something ready and prepared for March. I don't know if the chief is going to stop by or not. He was in the middle of doing something. We had talked about just talking to you guys for a few minutes.
Today?
If he had time.
Could you use your microphone a little more?
Yeah, I said
think
so.
it's.
Sorry. I said, I don't know if he's going to be able to stop by or not, but it's one of the things that we were going to talk about was, he was just to talk to you about some of the policy stuff and just kind of, thanks for keeping us in line with what we need to be doing. But to answer your question, Walt and Jay, is yes, we can have something prepared and some type of presentation ready to go, and we can set it for an agenda item in March and go back through, see where we're at, see what it looks like, and some of the stuff we've been working on that I've talked about is getting very close to going back into action. Like the lights on stuff, our car seat program, within probably a couple weeks of going live with some of that stuff again. And then just some of the chief's takes on enforcement and what we're doing and how we're gonna do that in the future. So.
Yeah, I think in the minutes, if I recall, there was a reference to, in April, there was going to be year-to-year comparative data, and so there was going to be a presentation in April. So I don't know if you want to do March and April, or if you can bring in, I don't want to really put it off, but if we want to do it twice, that's cool too, back-to-back months.
We might have a better response if you let me give them time to look at it and make sure that, because if we do in April and it's a year comparative, that would give us that full picture.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean. I sense some urgency on the part of the board to look at this. That's why I thought March would be better than April, but I'm okay with April.
Let's see here, April item. So Dane had considered doing a comparative analysis of the data. He said he was looking at doing that come April, because that's the 2-year mark for the niche upgrade. I don't want to hold it up an extra month, but I just wanted to bring that up, or maybe.
We can still, we could even still try to look at doing it, in March. You'll have a month,
Let's see
we'll be short a
what kind of
month.
progress there is, and so the April report would be much more comprehensive by that time.
I mean, it's up to how you all want to set the agenda.
I mean, quite frankly, I'd like to do one thorough presentation as opposed to piecemeal. And if the data is good enough in March to tell us what everybody needs to know, waiting for April's not necessary. If somebody thinks that it's better to wait for April to get a 2-year comparison, that's fine too. But I would think that you know what you're going to need to know
Yeah.
by looking
So
at the data in March,
when
if it's available.
When I leave here and I touch base with those two, I can send out an email that says we should have everything ready to go in March, or they said if we wait till April, this is what we're going to get, and you can make that determination on how you want to set it. Because I agree. I think that if we do one comprehensive one, it makes as much sense as doing one to do another one.
Well, there are two different data sets. One is for a full year, correct?
Well, they're sort of two different data sets. I mean, the 11 months worth of data is pretty instructive on what 12 months worth of data would look like.
Yeah, so it's April to April, that's 1 year. And what was discussed last time and what he's working on, as I understand it from my conversation today, is that the idea would be to have updated formats so we can see that, yes, we've got it set up so you can see the ROI, relative rate index, and that would be for a much smaller set of data. He's working with basically 3 months as opposed to 12.
Right, and
April would be a chance for us to have a good discussion of trends. We can see it over a period of time.
what I was hoping to try to, and that's fine, what I was hoping to try to avoid is having two detailed discussions over the same data, or essentially the same data, in multiple meetings. I'd like to get it all together and do it at one time.
And this is a board decision, but, Walt, you've been working with us and trying to get the things lined out, kind of, out of the meeting setting. If you want to continue to do that, we can keep working on it, make sure that we have what looks good, and then do the one presentation instead of tying up the meeting time 2 different times. But that's, like I said, it's your choice.
What does the board want to do?
For tracking and trend purposes, I think doing an annual comparison in April with the 2-year picture is much more valuable than doing an 11-month.
Snapshot.
It's 3 months, not 11.
Well, it's like I said, you can keep working with them, right? And seeing the data sets on the smaller and make sure that it makes sense for the larger scale presentation, if that's what you want to do. I'm happy to keep working with you on that. If the rest of the board wants to see one comprehensive presentation and do it that way.
What I would like to see is a presentation of enough data to understand what it shows us.
Yes.
And then a discussion of, okay, what does it mean? And if we understand what it means, or think we understand what it means, how do we address any issues that we perceive are present? And that's what I'd like to see. And so that would be a data presentation, a discussion, and then a presentation by the department of, here's the data, here's what we think we mean, here's how we would like to respond to it. That's what I think we ought to be doing.
Well, and if we do that, then I want to make sure then the requests that have come when we've seen the data a couple times prior, so specifically, if we can see the most common charges issued be broken down by race, because Dane said he could do that. And so if we're going to wait until April, I'd like to see that. And then it says here, Harris asked to see the math of how they came up with the data. So I would assume Dane could do that. And there could have been recommendations or suggestions from even the month prior on those minutes, and I didn't go back and look that far. Because we don't want to do it and then find out that all these things we'd asked for we still don't have it, and to have to go ahead and take up 2 meetings, like you said.
That's the purpose of having it in March. A brief presentation that has been worked on now, smaller data set. You don't have such a large amount of data to sort. I think it'd be a lot easier for the staff to do, not give us then a report in April that we have to go back and make modifications to.
All right,
Step at a time.
why don't we do this? Why don't we set an agenda item for March that's a tracking item where we can receive an update on the data crunching aspect of this effort, but not for the purposes of discussion of what it all means and what the response is. It's just an assessment of the data crunching exercise, and then try to set for April, if that works out.
Itself is what you're talking
What?
about. Just the tool itself, not what it,
Right. Just, here's what the tool is, here's how we've done it, is there anything wrong with the way we've done it, whatever. And then we'll talk about the meaning and the details and recommendations and things like that at the April meeting, if that makes sense. So the item for March would not be, the big discussion could take an hour or more. We're talking a more abbreviated discussion in March for planning purposes. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay.
cool.
We have a plan.
A couple more staffing items. I've asked a couple of times, and I think you were going to follow up on it. I wanted to see the policy on how to handle external complaints. 'Cause it came up a couple years ago, and it wasn't complete a couple years ago. That was the one that Carl Emmons was working on. And then if it's done.
So I have an answer for that.
Okay, good.
Talk about the policy discussion.
Okay, that's a
Policy.
separate item, all right?
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if you can get this, I was looking at ordinances last night, and there's 5.01.030, and it says the police department shall prepare a statistical summary of bias-based crimes, and then it gets submitted to the city manager and the Civil Rights Services Board. Is that a report that, as a CRB, we might like to see also? A statistical summary of bias-based crimes.
So so you're talking about for like FBI reporting?
I don't know, it was in there.
I would assume what that means is that, I have never seen it, but I would assume what that means is that it's a report that just basically tracks bias-based crime reported to the police department.
The
Yeah,
board
that could
doesn't
be.
exist anymore, does it?
I don't know.
I don't think it does.
What was the ordinance again?
At 5.01.030.
I assume that's like for hate crimes.
Yeah, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I've never seen the report. I don't know.
I mean, it would be an interesting thing to track, to see, like, particularly under a new chief, if that's getting better or worse.
Yeah, but I think that, but that's where the perpetrator committed a
Right,
crime based on a racial basis.
right, yeah.
So-
But, ideally.
Another way to measure that, because that's based on what you find out after the crime is committed, that there was a bias or not by the offender.
Right.
So how would you,
Oh, I don't know.
how would you
I'm just saying.
combat people's bias when they're committing a crime? You can stop and try to make crime go down.
Yeah.
But to make bias crimes go down, how would you ever measure that? I mean, other than just the number, how would you
Right.
say you're combating that when, for something to be considered a bias crime, the person has to almost express a bias when they're committing the
Yeah.
crime?
It could be that when we see it, we see there's no value, or it could be when we see it, there's great value.
I have to find out if it exists,
Okay.
what it is, and then we can go from there.
Why don't we just do that, see what it is?
I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on staff report? The next item on the agenda is reporting citizen requests to the PSB for case reviews. I'm not aware of any coming in except for today. We received to the CRB address, a request for review of here.
I saw that one too.
We received a request today for a review by a citizen on the CRB web's email address. Here, well, I may not have brought it with me. Did anybody else get that? I can pull off my email here. Yeah, who else got it? Give me the other page. Well, they're here.
On the FBI's website. Yeah, there you go.
We have a citizen's request for review of 22 PSB 5618, received today with an attached letter with some explanation of it. So based on the notion that we review citizens' complaints, we should put that on our list too. Is anybody aware of any other citizen requests directly?
Right, Jay, did you give a number out? I apologize.
Yeah, it's 22 PSB 5618. You'll need to check and see that it's closed and all
Right.
that, but
See if it's closed.
yeah, but I assume it is because she said that she got a letter, so.
I'll check on it.
Are there any other requests?
What was the number?
5618.
8?
Yes.
All right. The next item relates to the same subject matter, and then we'll also go into the reporting on our subcommittee, and that is the policy for our subcommittee reviews. Our subcommittee has met and has done a really good job, I think, of getting organized and doing what needs to be done. In the packet, it's appropriate that the board have a policy, I guess, to just kind of explain the process. So in the packet, there is a proposed policy on subcommittee case screening, which I think that the board might want to consider for adoption. It tracks pretty much exactly what our subcommittee did just this last week. But is there any discussion on that?
I like that you have clarity in here that let's see, where is it? I think I saw that the officers, like their prior history is going to be included because we were, since it was new to everybody, we didn't have like the total officers' history on that. Did I see that?
So yeah, what we talked about was whether like in the subcommittee, that we would still have the discipline history included.
Right.
But by the way, you have this written, do you think that, and this is just a question for you in general, that it's okay to have all the same information? There's nothing that we're going to violate on any open meeting rules or anything like that with 3 people to have all the same information in there and we're good for the executive summaries?
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
fine. I mean, I know
Good
that,
now, Twyla, we're good on that.
Okay. Terrific.
is there any other discussion about the proposed policy?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion that I would like to pass out that pertains to this issue, and I've made extra copies so each of us can take a look at it.
All right.
Would you pass this down that way?
Maybe I can.
Here you go, Jennifer.
So as far as the subcommittee, I wasn't here. Nobody said me over.
Keely.
There you go, ma'am.
I'll read it very simply. It is an effort to try to make sure that we have more transparency and accountability for the review process, both the subcommittees as well as the board as a whole. And what I'm suggesting is that we have a motion that each complainant whose WPD Professional Standards Bureau case is reviewed by the Wichita Citizen Review Board shall be invited to present the facts of their case and be allowed to stay and respond to statements and/or evidence submitted during the presentation made by the Wichita Police Department officers and city legal staff regarding their complaint. Now, as you know, currently we have a complainant can come in, but then we dismiss them before they ever hear what the police department is ever saying. In a court of law, that would never be allowed. You have a chance for both sides to make their presentation, and then the jury decides later. So what this second paragraph says, after both the complainants and the city employees have been heard, the room shall be cleared to allow the Citizens Review Board to deliberate and reach their recommendations in private. So it'd be the same as a jury, having an opportunity to hear both sides. Now you're able to sit down as a board and come up with a conclusion. What are our findings and what are our recommendations on that particular case? And then the third paragraph says, to assure transparency and accountability, during the next scheduled meeting of the board, a written statement of findings and recommendations shall be approved by a vote of at least 7 appointed members of the board and shall be recorded in the minutes. A copy of the case review findings and recommendations shall be mailed to both the complainant and the Wichita Police Department chief. So that is to make sure that we comply with the Open Records Act and the executive statutes. That is the statute KSA 75-4319, which says that we cannot make a determination in executive session. It has to be done in an open meeting. So this allows us to do that and have some conclusion to a case. So it's not just left out there in limbo and the complainant never knows what it was we decided, what the findings were. So I would offer that as a motion, and if I can get a second, perhaps we could discuss it.
Second.
And moved and seconded, I would note that the motion fails to comply with the ordinance that establishes our board, and the board does not have authority to undertake the action in the manner suggested by the motion. The ordinance specifically allows, and was amended at our request, to allow a complainant who chose to do so to appear in executive session, but the ordinance then requires the complainant to be excused. And so we are not allowed to adopt a procedure like this under the current ordinance.
I believe if I read that correctly, they're excused, but it didn't say when. And we now have only one side of the story. We get, basically, a captain will be able to give, but it's basically hearsay. He doesn't have first-hand knowledge of the investigation. He wasn't doing the investigation. So we hear a summary of a case. It's doing the best he can, I understand that. But with the complainant there, then they can hear what's being said and offer their counter information so we have a full story. It's not just say dismiss. Now, I read the ordinance, and perhaps you want to read it again, but I see that it does not specifically say that they're dismissed prior to the presentation.
Well, we have legal counsel here, and she can advise, but my understanding of the reading of the ordinance that the complainant was allowed to appear and make a confidential presentation, but would be excluded from the rest of the process.
I believe this would require a change to the ordinance if this motion was, to be passed, there would have to be a change to the ordinance to comply. This is outside. I believe this is outside of the current ordinance. If you seek this change, I think the city council would have to amend the ordinance to allow for this process.
Well, would you pull the ordinance up? Perhaps you could read it. I'm not sure that it says specifically they have to be released before the police department makes its presentation.
The ordinance subsection little c says said individual will not be allowed to attend the board's deliberation or discussion of the complaint while in executive session. Discussion of the complaint, I think, is broad enough to include consideration of the information.
If I might point out to you that section 2 of this motion specifically says after both presentations are done. So that ordinance says after the presentation is complete, they leave. This is an exact compliance of that. Why wouldn't we want to have the complainant be able to hear what's being said about their complaint? Why would that be helpful to this board?
Other discussion?
Well, I would, depending on whether, I mean, this is not necessarily, doesn't necessarily pertain to, like, if you decide like that part is in or out, that's fine. But I would like the board to consider, and certainly this would probably have to be rewritten, but I like the idea of having the room cleared for our private deliberations. I would like for us to be able to speak freely, and then afterwards, we could have a united finding to present to when they come back in the room. But I would really, I love this idea of being able to deliberate in private.
Part of the reason I bring this forward, Mr. Chairman, is that last month, we had a young lady come in, and she made a complaint. We heard it in public, and then she was able to make a presentation in executive session. But it was obvious that she was fairly nervous. We had a lot of police officers there, and she felt intimidated. I think we have an opportunity to have both sides heard in a fair executive session where we get all the information in confidence, but that the complainant is there to be able to provide their side of the story as well.
Mr. Chair, I have some concerns that the deliberation of this body within an executive session would not comply with the Kansas Open Meetings Act. Under the way this body is created, I'm not sure. This is a quasi-judicial entity. I would need to look at that, whether it can comply.
If you remained, Jennifer, would that make?
That would not make a difference.
It doesn't.
I just need to would look at that concept, whether it could even apply.
I move that this motion be tabled for legal review and advice, subject to a report at the next meeting on whether or not the proposal complies with the requirements of both COMA and our ordinance chartering our existence. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor to table, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right.
I think there also should be a point of clarification whether this proposed motion pertains to the full board's review, or we're having a subcommittee now, and whether this procedure would also apply to the subcommittee.
Right. Well, of course, the subcommittee is really only intended to be a screening committee and not an adjudication committee at all. So I would hope it would not apply to that, or it would.
Well, so would I.
Ability to do a subcommittee. All right, let's go back to the proposal for the procedure on subcommittee case screening. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right, motion passes, policies adopted. Okay. We have, what? What there? All right. Chief's here. Chief wants to visit briefly. We'll just interrupt that process.
I just wanted to say, I know one of the matters you're going to discuss, and one of the requests was the opening up of, in public, the list of policies that work faster. We'll see you a little bit later.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I thought that was a great idea. I just wanted to thank you for bringing that to my attention. And I think we made public all but
7
of the policies that you asked about. Those remaining policies, they involve the airport. A lot of information is not even within my purview to make public. Bomb, SWAT, hazmat, those technical things that involve the technical procedures we use to render things safe. So that could, potentially endanger the officers that have to do those dangerous duties. But the vast majority of those policies, I think there's no reason. All use of force policies are public, which I think is especially important. And if there's any of the policies that you still would like to discuss, I have no problem reconsidering anything that you asked me to. Just let the good captain know, but I thought that was a great idea. And appreciate that, bringing that to my attention.
We'll go over the list when we get to that agenda item, so you'll be able to know what all of them are.
I'm not
And
sure
then-
if you're getting recorded. You hold the mic.
He got it.
So those 7 that are excluded, but they can still be reviewed here?
Yes.
Okay. They're just not
gonna be-
public.
Oh, yeah,
Sure.
you can't publicly access them on our
Yeah.
website. You can review all of the policies.
Yeah.
And again,
Perfect.
even if you question any of the 7 that, we had an in-depth discussion about this
Yeah.
among the command staff and among some of my subject matter experts. Like, for instance, K-9, that's public. Now, anything involving use of force is now public. And there were just other policies on there that I have no idea why they were ever taken away from public purview. I can't even bloodborne pathogens, things of that nature. So I don't know if that was just an oversight. I think in terms of us being more transparent, I think we've accomplished that objective. And like I said, nothing's off the table except definitely the airport, because I just can't release information about the airport because there's a lot of other agencies involved in that. And that's very sensitive as far as how we approach the airport in an emergency, and they've shared a lot of information.
Right, and that was never our request anyway. I think our request was just the missing 900 policies that were there and then disappeared for a while. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the use of force, so I don't, again, I already released that information when I'm asked to the media, so there's no reason why it wasn't. I don't know, but, as the new guy in town, you're constantly trying to find things like that you can very quickly fix. So I just want to thank you for bringing that to my attention, so I could very easily do that. So thank you for what you do here.
All right.
I wanted to say that, and appreciate it very much. I'll see you all later, Pastor.
All right, thank you.
Stay for a second.
You, Chief.
Chief, would you allow this board to have an opportunity to review some of those policies before you make the final decision about what changed and what didn't? That's one of the things that was done prior to your coming, was citizen review.
Before I open them up, you want to review them?
No, I think what Walt is saying, that he may be confused about, the 900 policies, of course, have been policies in place for a long time, and the board's actually reviewed a number of them in the past. I think Walt may be asking about if you're developing a new policy, what would be your criteria, your plan to have?
If the department develops any new policies, we'll be happy to let the board review them before they go into place.
All right, I think that was your question.
And secondarily, Walt, when policies come up for review on whether it's annual or whatever basis, I send that out to the board prior to the meetings and say if there's any policies, these are up for review, if there's any policies you want to review, that we can put them on the agenda to review. So that's where that opportunity comes in.
There's never been any policies that this board is prohibited from reviewing, nor will there be.
All right.
All right?
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, continue on with our, before we get to the gunshot, I think we've now established that we're going to have the subcommittee review the 3 cases identified by Twyla. The captain had suggested that we try, while we wouldn't necessarily have a subcommittee meeting every month, that we pick a standard date for that subcommittee meeting so that we could not have to spend a lot of time worrying about scheduling.
Yeah, it would benefit us if me, and probably all of you, just if we would, if we want to do it, say the 3rd Thursday, of the month, or a date in the middle of the month that is about a week prior to the monthly meeting, so that we can have it done, get everything prepared, and then come back with the findings or the recommendations from the subcommittee. I'd like to set it the same day every month and have it, I don't know if we'll be able to get this boardroom, but have it here at the central location where we can do that. So it doesn't, I think we need a couple weeks in there, right? But usually within a couple weeks, and especially if we're doing what you're talking about, which is screening these cases on the front end and looking at those, they're not going to be most of the time as in depth for me to look at all of them. and get the information. So at least a couple weeks in, and either a week or 2 weeks before, it's either way. And that's kind of up to you on, I know everybody's schedules are
There's a third, if we pick the third Thursday as opposed to we're on the fourth Thursday, so if we pick the third one, would that be a way to do it? Anybody have any concern?
Well, and I would just ask flexibility. I mean, there's only 3 of us, right? And if the third Thursday isn't going to work in May, then maybe you can be a little flexible and we can find a date that would work for
Well,
all
I think
of us.
what we might try to do, I assume the subcommittee might be fluid, we move members around. But if we're,
That's what we said, talked about the subcommittees, rotating.
right.
Different people.
Right, so why don't we just try to pick the day at the meeting the subcommittee is picked, so that we don't have, I mean, we'll just decide the 3 day, if we have 3 cases right now, so who wants to be on the subcommittee?
Oh, so it won't be the same people?
What?
I thought when we were picking subcommittee, I thought it was going to be not just like one and done.
Oh, I don't care, I mean, I was, all
I'm committed to that.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
What do you mean one and done?
Yeah, but I think it should be
Pardon?
fluid as well, because there are going to be some cases that maybe someone may have a more peak interest in than others. But
Right.
it doesn't matter to
Well,
me. I could care
also
less.
that, like you said, like sometimes somebody might say, I'm too busy in May, but I'm willing to do
Right.
June.
Right.
Or that kind of a
Okay,
thing.
so we're not limiting it to 3 people? Well, no, we have to limit it to
well,
some.
it can't be a quorum,
Right.
but anyway,
But it could be a different 3 people.
or it could be 4
Even if
people.
you came up with a start of a list that says in March, these 3, April, these 3, and kind of came up with
That
your
makes
own list, then I can at least work with them. It's just, this last month was difficult for just the 4 of us to find a time and date for us to get there. And I just thought if we can keep it to either a specific day, a day of the month as much as we can, or you come up with a list of these are the people scheduled ahead, we can schedule it out a little further, something.
Right.
To make it just, because it felt like a lot of emails going back and forth,
There was a lot of email. That's true.
just for 4 of us to try to find one spot in time to finally get together. And the honest truth of it is, with as much as we all have going on, I don't want to miss it, I don't want to miss something. And then we're 2 days ahead and somebody's like, well, I told you I couldn't do that date, things
Well,
like that.
can we then agree that subject to potential modification by the members of the subcommittee, that the plan, for planning purpose, it would be the 3rd Thursday at 4 PM? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We'll just do that for planning purposes. And then we have 3 cases already identified for subcommittee review.
4. Because we have Odell's.
Yep.
Odell's was not necessarily for subcommittee review. Well, I guess.
I'm sorry, not subcommittee, but I guess, sorry, Jay, I was getting ahead. So there's 4, you had 3, Odell has 1, and so then that can take us several months out, right? If we only do 2 a month.
Right, yeah, no.
So maybe one or some of these should also go to the subcommittee.
So Twyla, what I just want to throw in there, the ones that they had picked today were ones that were either excessive force type ones, use of force ones, that I think probably the intention is for the whole board to hear when they hear it.
Well, I'm just.
Throwing that out there.
Yeah, but then we're 2 months out. Like
Right, but we frequently are 2 or 3
April,
months out.
May, and then if we pick 4 next month, more than half the year's gone.
Yeah,
You make a good point, though,
I
Travis.
hear what you're
Yeah.
saying. I'm just trying to
Yeah, no,
make
you
sure
make a
they
good
cover that
point.
part because, like I said, if somebody here picked one that they want to review,
Yeah.
but they're not part of the subcommittee, they might not want that to happen either.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so I don't care. I mean, we have the 3 cases Twyla picked, which I think are all related or similar kinds of cases, so that made sense to do. If the one Odell picked was, I think 3210, was that the one Odell picked, or is that one you picked?
15.
Yeah, 4215.
4215. Okay, well, that's also one I picked, so we both picked that one. So And 4215 is a continuation of the old texting case. So,
That's one that we're all interested in,
right, so there we go. That solves that problem.
the subcommittee.
Right.
So we have the three cases Twyla picked. Who wants to be on the subcommittee? Same subcommittee? Same subcommittee? All right. Why don't we just do that, and then next time around, we might add some more people, but why don't we delegate that review to the three of you and try to do it on that day unless something comes up, and we'll post an agenda and proceed accordingly.
I appreciate this policy on the subcommittee. I think when we sat down, it was, we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants.
Well, you landed the plane, so I think,
So, yeah, but
I think it worked.
it worked out.
Right.
But this gives a good indication as to what it is that we're supposed to be doing and put some teeth to it, so.
Right. And so, and just for one final item before we move to the next item, the subcommittee met, the subcommittee has its minutes. The minutes have been reported out. It's in your packet, and the subcommittee made a decision that those cases warranted no further review. Is that a fair summary?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
I want to bring back to the board's attention a very key part of the motion I made earlier. And that is to say that we're going to invite to the presentation the person who filed the complaint. So far as I've seen it over the last couple of years that I've attended these meetings, I don't see that we're getting both sides of the story. And if the person filing the complaint isn't involved, we only hear the police side. And I don't know how often this board has ever changed any of their conclusions, but as far as I know, it's very seldom, if ever. So I'm asking for the subcommittee, would they please invite the complainant to come?
No, well, I don't think that's appropriate because the subcommittee, first of all, if the complainant has asked for the review, the subcommittee won't even see it. That doesn't go to the subcommittee. And this is simply a screening mechanism. It is not intended to be a
That's my point, sir. The subcommittee is going to screen for the whole board, and they're only going to hear one side of the story. And the complainant's point of view is never there. So if they just say, no problem here, go on, we're never going to know.
Don't we only review cases where it's requested by the citizen?
No, if the citizen has requested that we review, which is rare, it doesn't happen very often.
Right, like we got today.
The full board will review it.
Right.
What the subcommittee was intended to do is if we go through this case list and there's something on there that we think, we should look at, because we now know that 90% of our case reviews, or a large number, maybe it's not that high, are not of consequence when we look at the data. And so let's not spend the entire board's time looking at something that is not of consequence. And so let's screen them somehow.
But we don't solicit people to come.
Right. But if a citizen feels like they want their complaint reviewed, they should tell us, and we will review it.
And that automatically would go to the board.
And that would automatically go to the full
They never
board.
know. They never know. These are just PSA numbers. How would anyone know that their complaint is being heard?
Because they are getting generally notice. If the ordinance now says, and I haven't tracked it, so I can't guarantee 100% compliance, that if a citizen has complained and their case is being reviewed, they get notified.
Well, that's a lot of ifs.
Well,
Looking at here, we pull the numbers. We say, the subcommittee, please look at this, and they're only getting one side of the story. I would never see that, I've been in a lot of situations in my life, where you hear one point of view, and by God, when you listen to the rest of the story, you say, damn, why didn't they come up with tell me all the story?
Well, the screening mechanism is a screening mechanism. If the citizen has a complaint, we will review it. The screening committee is not intended to be an adjudication of the complaints, only to the extent that if the evidence available, which is usually acts on video, suggests that nothing further be done, then they tell that to the remaining board members.
Final sentence in the first paragraph says, any of the cases reviewed shall be considered by the full board. So they're doing a screening, as you say, and they're basing all their decision about whether the full board should see it only upon what they hear from the police department.
Well, you're misunderstanding what that says. If a complainant has asked the CRB review, the subcommittee doesn't look at it. That's not part of the process.
I understand that's the bottom part of this policy. The first paragraph has the one where they're doing the screening and they decide whether we should look at it as a full board.
Right?
Well, in a way,
For another meeting?
Yeah.
It's been tabled, so this discussion, right?
Well, it has been tabled, I thought, but unless we need to move on, Walt.
That's what I'm saying.
but not to muddy the waters, Walt does have a point here. Let's see, section 210.090, review a post subsection lowercase c. It says the individual, and this is a couple sentences says, but the individual making the initial complaint to the PSP shall be notified of the board's review of PSP findings and may address the board during the executive session. But I agree. If we take the time to review this and then come back, but you have an amazing memory of the stuff that's in here.
Okay, let's move on because we are running out of time. The next item on the agenda is the review of policy 807, the gunshot detection system.
So everybody does have, you put that in the, that's the policy?
Yes.
So when we talked about this a couple months ago now, and we were going to put on the agenda, I had asked if there was any specific questions to start off, and I know Ms. Johnson had a couple questions.
I asked for the data.
And so I don't know, has everybody had time to read the policy? Or do that?
Right.
People reviewed it. I don't know if you have any statements you want to make to start off with, or you just want to go straight to questions from board members on what they want to know. It's up to you, Captain.
I'd like a little bit of an overview and a discussion of the value and how the department views it.
All right, and that'll probably make it a whole lot easier. So again, I'm Captain Ronald Hunt. I'm the captain over property crimes. So a little, I guess, history in regards to this. The gunshot detection program began in 2018 here in Wichita. This was a federally funded grant that the department received, okay? It was about $153,000 for this grant in regards to new and innovative technology that could assist law enforcement. All right, and I am the third captain associated with this program, so I'm on the tail end of this altogether. All right.
When you say tail end, does that mean this is being phased out?
I'll kind of get to that at the end.
Right.
So initially, the program was, an area was selected over in the Patrol East area, which was about, let's say, Kellogg south to about Harry, and about Bluff over to Oliver area, and mainly centrally around the Hilltop area. Those first sensors, and we had contacted with an individual who had his own company. The company was called Hunem, Hueneme, okay? So he was kind of his own person, his own individual, had started his own company in regards to this. He had developed some sensors that were to go up in this phase 1 area, and we, right from the beginning, had a lot of issues with the implementation and the sensors even working. In 2020, And basically, we were not receiving any data from that Phase 1 area, okay? In 2020, a second area was selected, and there were some upgraded sensors that were made. The area for the Phase 2 area was from 9th Street to 17th, and from I-135 over to Hillside. The reason for that area, there was through our analysis and data, there was a high volume of gunshots that were being fired in that general area. So we wanted to see, again, if the sensors were working and did perform as they should.
Same company?
The same company,
Okay,
yes.
I know Phase 1, but then I know.
No.
Phase 2, same company, okay.
Same company.
Okay.
So that area was identified in August of 2020. The sensors were deployed in that area, okay? And so at this time, the second captain who was over this, Captain Clay Germany, right at about this time was his unfortunate passing, okay? So, and that's when I basically took over. I took over in September of 2020 in regards to the program. So I had a lot of catching up to do and a lot to kind of learn in regards to the program. So even with the Phase 2 sensors, there were 26 sensors that were deployed in the area. Almost immediately, there were only 18 that were even, and this is from the company, that were reporting data correctly, or that they were transmitting data. So there were still a lot of issues. It wasn't working properly. Like he had sent me one information, or actually two, he said were confirmed gunshots, because every time one of those sensors would go off, it was supposed to be reported to 911. They were logging and keeping the information. So at one point, he had communication with him. He had sent me some information. One of these areas, gunshots that he said went off, was more than a mile outside of the test area. And then a second one was over 2.5 miles outside of the test area. And I was trying to get some clarification and information from him for that. And so, again, not a lot of great data was being recorded. In 2021, all right, so now we're to 2021, these sensors have still been up, they're still partially transmitting, whatever. This grant was set to expire at the end of September 2021, okay? We had used $100,000 of this grant. We still had about $53,000 left. I was not happy with the results that we were getting. There were a lot of, because this gentleman was out in California, if there was something wrong, he wasn't readily available to be here to work on and help with the program. Additionally, a second problem that we did kind of find with this is because these sensors were up on Evergy's poles, we had to wait on their schedule to either take them up or put them down if they needed to be worked on or whatever. So there were a lot of complications associated with all of this. So with this grant that was set to expire at the end of September 2021, I wanted to utilize the additional money, take it from this program and put it to a different program, an innovative program that the department was working on, which was the Project Save a Casing program. And I can give you information on that if you're interested as well. It should be noted that there was a kind of a liaison for the city as well that worked in the IT department. So I had to kind of coordinate with him on some of this as well. And again, because I wasn't getting information from him or the company, I said, I think we need to move away from this. So basically, and with this grant running out, that's what we did. The Wichita Police Department stepped away from the gunshot detection program in basically August of 2021. No, I'm sorry. 2022, just this last year. We moved away, we moved the rest of that money to the gunshot Save a Casing program.
What program said that again?
The Save a Casing.
Oh, okay.
The IT department felt that there was still some value in this program, and they had wanted to continue on with it, okay? So the IT initially continued working with this program. I can tell you that a third-party vendor was brought in to assist the original developer of the program, and the test 3 area, which I think this one actually I think made a little more sense to me and probably should have been done on the front end. The test 3 area that was identified, they picked the Cowtown area. So with the reoccurring gunfights, the guns going off, as well as a controlled environment, they could have done a lot better testing of the sensors. So that area was selected in regards to that. And again, that was kind of basically selected right as the department was moving away from the program. So the last communication I've had kind of with IT, they weren't getting information from this third-party vendor as well, and it was some of their suggestion that they maybe begin to pull away from the project as well.
So all the money was spent on testing?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
All the money was spent on testing?
Well, it was for the development of the sensors and everything. So, but it was a federal grant, so there was no cost to the citizens of Wichita.
Fund, but we paid for it.
Thank you.
Well,
How much was the total amount you spent? 100 and how much?
Well, the program, we spent $100,000 on the program.
So why do you pay a vendor when they don't deliver, I guess? Like if it wasn't working, right? I guess maybe that's how the contract was written. You pay me and we're going to assume it works. And that's not, I mean, you didn't do it, but I would just, that's kind of unfortunate.
Well, I can tell you that a lot of departments around the country and a lot of companies are looking to be very innovative with technology.
Yeah.
So theoretically, could this work? Absolutely. And it would be a great system if it did to assist law enforcement. So we could, because a lot of times there are gunshots that do go off that citizens may not call the police. So, we want to be able to respond and document appropriately. Just unfortunately, we're not always given that information. So technology is very beneficial, and we were very hopeful that this would be one of them as well.
So have you effectively discontinued it? I mean,
The Wichita Police Department, we've stepped away from it.
are there other departments that, or other technology? This sounds like an interesting idea, and it sounds like an idea that ought to work with modern technology at some point. Are there other departments that have, other cities that have these systems that work?
So I can tell, and, excuse me, there's another company, Flock System. They have a system called Raven. That system is being tested in, I want to say Atlanta, because that's Flock's home city. And I can tell you recently, we do have some here in Wichita, but I don't have any information in regards to that program. We are not paying for it. So there's, again, no cost to the city. But they're just testing to see the validity of their sensors. But again, I'm not a part of that project, so I don't have the information as well. And I apologize for that.
That's fine.
How many murders were solved as a result of this data that you gathered?
I'm sorry?
How many murders were solved as a result of having triangulation on a specific spot where a gunshot went off?
Well, again, as I've stated, the Flocks, the gunshot detection program hasn't been as beneficial as we would have hoped for. And again, I think it's the very early stages of this technology. So it hasn't benefited us in that manner.
So the answer is no, zero, none?
Correct.
All right. And would ask Captain Easter, maybe, is he still here?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Will you come to Mike and let us know what you found about the voucher program for exit tickets for taillights and also for the infant seats?
Well,
Like, short of money, can we use some of that money for those purposes?
No, you cannot. This was a federal grant that was designated for innovative technology, and that is not an innovative technology. So we would be in violation of this federal grant, which would harm us not only in the future, we would have to pay those fines back to the federal government. And again, you know, if there were other innovative programs or anything we would ask the federal government for in the future, they would tell us no, because you're not spending that money appropriately.
Okay, but you transferred the remaining 50,000 or so to something else. What?
To the Operation Save a Casing, which is, again, it's a program designed where we're working to get citizens to save at least 2 casings of their firearm. In case their firearm is stolen, they give us the shell casing. We're able to use that in regards to the NIBIN, and we're able actually to link and track different guns that have been used in violent crime. And so that falls under the innovative grant guidelines.
Having to do with firearms. I understand. So can we have an update on how we're doing with vouchers and infant seats?
Well, Walt, I'm here to speak about the gunshot detection program. That's what I've been asked to speak for today, and that's what I'm happy to answer questions for right now.
Well, I'll provide an update on that in a little bit.
Thank you, sir.
This policy.
So should this policy be retired?
That's not my decision. I would probably say, so. I think, again, when this policy was originally written, we wanted, we're not trying to hide the things that we're doing. So we're trying to be transparent, and we had some perimeters and guidelines in regards to the policy, and that's why it was initially implemented. Again, it hasn't even been a year that we've kind of stepped away from the gunshot detection program. And honestly, I don't know if it's still recording data. But if I was the decision maker in regards to that, I would probably say, yes, let's retire this policy, because it's currently not in use and of value to us. But if there's a product down the road, if the Raven system is more fruitful, then I think this policy would still be applicable and could be used at that point. So probably not maybe retired right now, maybe after the analysis of the Raven system, and we could make that determination then.
So is there a policy on the Raven system?
It would fall basically under this, because it's still the same, it's a gunshot detection.
Right. But there's probably not, and the board here knows that I'm kind of a stickler for policies, right? And if we have a policy, the department here has a policy, and it's not specific, then it should either be upgraded to be specific, maybe for Raven, because this references like a Firefox application. So, but you're not the decision maker, so any discussion around this?
Firefox is an application, it's a program that is utilized. So,
even for Raven?
And again, I'm...
For 911.
Yeah, I think that because 911 was to monitor.
Okay.
And so that may be their system, the Firefox. I think they still use it, don't they? Do anyone?
Well, I can maybe, if we get to the next one on policy, I'll try to answer that a little bit too. But the quick answer is, if a policy, if we aren't going to use something anymore or it's going to be gone, the policy has to come up for review, and then it can be deleted or, revised. But that's where the policy revisions come in, and that's where if we're not utilizing something anymore, then we would have to.
Okay, so you wait until it's up for review, so it could be in place for a couple years, and then it's up for review, and then we say we get rid of it. Oh, it's annually, okay.
Like I tell you, I think every one of them are.
Okay.
And I think this is a good policy. I'm just not sure that what I'm hearing matches what was on the green sheet when council voted on this. So I'm going to go back and look at that.
Yeah, and yeah, again, I think it was 2018, and that was long before I.
Yeah.
So I don't know the
Not holding you accountable.
Policy voted on, but, I think, again, at the time, we're looking for anything that's going to be beneficial to the citizens of Wichita and be fruitful and help us solve violent crimes. And unfortunately, I think this was just one that, wasn't as beneficial as we'd hoped for.
So is this original company, the HUENEME, are there sensors still here in Wichita up on Evergy poles? Taking data for this company in California, or?
As far as I know, they are. Again, the department stepped away kind of in last August, so I don't know all the specifics in regards to that. I have continually, when I was contacted about a month ago in regards to information, I did reach out to the city IT person in an attempt to get more information from him, and he even told me that he has had trouble communicating and getting information from people in regards to from the company. Yes.
Right, and so were these sensors, were these purchased by the department, or were they leased from this company, and so they belong there, or do they belong to the police department now?
It was a federal grant, so that would be one thing we would have to really look into. They may be.
Money was given to this.
I mean, if anything, it may be the federal government's property, because it was their funding for the items.
I bet it's ours. I bet they're ours.
Probably ours is probably junk, but.
And then there are these poles that were problematic in the neighborhoods too, so.
Well, Captain, I appreciate your providing report. Are there any other questions on this subject?
Thanks, Ron.
Absolutely.
I think we need a curtain over here. Yeah, we're getting right. Let's go to the police policy questions. As Chief Sullivan noted, at some point last summer in July, the 900 level policies from the policy manual disappeared from the internet, and so we asked why, and quite frankly, I think it was a result of a miscommunication, but they've all been put back. And so they were put back this week. And so they cover all the use of force. They cover Brady Giglio. They cover bias-based policing. There's a whole series of things they cover. And so if you're interested in what they are, they're all.
Chairman, is there a formal process that you've discussed with the chief that would allow us to have access to these policy recommendations prior to their approval?
Well, the chief just said that he was going to give them to us, Walt.
Yeah, but when? Is it, when they're already about ready to be finalized, or do we have input in the process?
In the past, the way we've done it, when Chief Ramsey was here, if it was a policy that he thought might be of consideration by the board, for example, the duty to intervene policy, some use of force policies, those things.
The minors,
the minors, they were provided to us in advance of the final adoption.
I would hope. So could you or the board decide today that we would ask that the policies they're under review for possible change, we notify and be given copies of it now?
I think Captain Easter's going to talk about that subject, and I think that the chief just told us he would do that. But Captain, go ahead.
Yes, so Walt, when policies come up for review, and I will double check, Twyla, I think, so it's not that every policy is reviewed in a calendar year, but as they're reviewed, then they're set for a date. So they might not all be at the same time, if that makes sense. That's why you'll get an email that says like these three or these three.
Yeah, no.
But I do believe every policy is reviewed on an annual basis. And then, and I'll double check that. But then, well, what I do is I get the email from the person who does the policy keeping for us, right? Who sends it saying these policies are going to be up for review in the next month or the next 2 months. I send that to the board saying these are the policies that are coming up for review. If the board wants to review any of these or make recommendations, let me know. We set it for an agenda item and then the board can review it.
Thank you.
Okay?
Feels like it's been
Captain, I don't think,
time. Oh,
just to clarify, I don't think every policy gets reviewed every year. I think
Okay.
there's a longer, like,
Are there some, thank you.
just so you know.
I see it, and I thought that's what it was, but thank
Not
you.
sure. I just don't think they're every year.
I think
There are some policies that are reviewed annually.
Yes.
And then I think that
There are some-
there's a 5-year that every policy is reviewed within 5 years. Some policies are annual and some are on a different.
I'm okay with-
I was trying to remember, like, most of the time when we review policies, it says at the end of the policy when the next review. I remember seeing, and it's not on this,
I can tell if you all haven't been here as long as you have, you teach me a lot every time, I'm not gonna lie.
But I remember seeing that on other policies, is that the next review date is set for.
I'll see how it's set and just give you the answer on that. So out of the ones, Jim, I'm sorry, are you done with?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically what, as we were talking about, all the 900 policies that you'd asked about are open now. There were, sorry, 7 policies that were still deemed critical, that are not going to be placed for public view. And those are airport emergencies, barricaded suspects and SWAT procedures, bomb squad and clandestine lab responses, hazardous material incidents, public demonstration and emergency response team response, the long-range acoustic device policy, and the search warrant policy. So those are the policies that are not on public view. Every other policy is now updated or
What was
not
the one you
updated.
said, public demonstration and what?
Public demonstration and the emergency response team.
Okay, and that's all one policy, you said?
Yes, yes. Public demonstration / emergency response.
I'd sure like to see that one. We arrest people for writing with chalk. So I'd like to see that.
So on, and we've had this discussion in the past, on these policies, that, out of these 7 that you would want to see, then what we do is we can set it for an agenda item and have to go to executive session to then have the board hear and review it, and then go back in. Is that right? Or how did we talked about it, and I don't remember what.
Our lawyer's scrunching over there. It may not be amenable to an executive session.
Okay. I don't know. I know we can't discuss it here, but I don't know.
I think you can share the policy with the board. If there's a need to discuss it and make a recommendation, we'll have to figure out whether or not we can do it, because our recommendations that are formal have to be in public session under the rules. But as I heard this, I think you can share them with us. What the department's concern was is making them publicly available.
Well, and I don't think I think that's a little, I don't think I can even share them. I think that there's a way they can be viewed individually by a person, but I cannot send them out via email.
All right, I was thinking that, some of them, just thinking out loud here, obviously the bomb ones and the SWAT procedures and airport stuff, that is, you wouldn't want to post them on the internet or make them publicly available. I can see that. The question I have is the mechanism for us to say, look at a public demonstration policy. That might be relevant to the board.
We could look, we just couldn't make recommendations. We could view it in an executive session. We just can't make recommendations without it, right? Is that my understanding?
I'm afraid under the Kansas Open Meetings Act, there are limited purposes for an executive session, and I can't see that review of this document would fit under one. I'll take a look at it. But
What we can also do is, now that you know what they are and you've heard them, I can get with Ms. Magana and see what the proper way to try to do this would be, and we can come up with an answer as to what legally makes the best sense for us to do this, and we can get a response back to you.
Yeah, I'd like to see the search warrant one also. Now, I guess I don't understand, we can't be trusted for you to email these to us, right? I mean, because we all took an oath, right, that we're not going to share anything, or is it because email is not a safe transmission?
Email is not.
Right, but I mean, you can encrypt it, right?
Well, I couldn't just, it's the same thing as releasing it. I couldn't give that policy to anybody.
But the chief just said we could definitely see any one of them.
Okay. I understand what he said.
He said we
Yeah.
can review it.
Yeah, we do it.
Review.
Yeah.
I think the concern is, I mean, I think the chief said we could review it, and I think we probably can. The question is how we would review it and whether we would discuss it. And that's where you get into the open meetings issue. So if we all got together and read it together in a meeting and started talking about it, that may be an Open Meetings Act issue, and that's the concern. And so let's have Jennifer think about this and talk to the captain, and I'm certain at some level we'll get to see the policies we need to see, but let's figure out the proper mechanism to do it and comply with the law and the security requirements.
During these policies, were you going to talk about that policy on how to handle external
Yeah,
complaints?
so I talked to, I talked to Lieutenant Lemons. What he'd actually done a presentation for on the board was about inquiries and not external investigations. So that's the information he had. But in the policies, what he had done for the Citizens Review Board
Right.
wasn't, and what he presented was a deal on inquiries.
No, it wasn't.
Well, that's what he
That was not his presentation. No, that was not his presentation. During one of those presentations, it came to the board's attention that there was no standard policy through all the department on how external complaints were handled, not like a step-by-step, right? That's what came up, and we were surprised. I wasn't on the board then, but the board, I remember, was like, wow, there's no policy? And Carl said, I'm working on it.
Well, there's not, so what I would first direct you to do is look at policy 901 for administrative internal investigations, see if that answers what it is that you're asking, because it references external complaints, how they come in, how they're handled, where they're assigned, and stuff like that. So see if that answers it. When I asked him about what you had said, he sent me a deal on a PowerPoint on inquiries, said this is what I presented to the board.
Yeah, and it is. He presented something to the board differently. Okay, so then I have his notes. He was starting on the policy. I actually have it. And I actually was helping him amend it.
That he did not send me.
Well, do you want it?
Yeah, you can send it, and I'll see if it was incorporated into something we have.
I can do that. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Terrific, thanks.
There is one, the chief and I had a discussion several weeks ago, and he indicated that one of the things he was thinking about and would probably bring to the board would be a revised policy for off-duty work. And we actually have discussed that subject matter in the past, but I think it's relevant to some recent events. And so you might make a note. I don't know the status of that revision yet, but that's something the board might want to look at. And I think the chief said that was something.
I have not heard anything about it, but I'll check.
He told me that was something that he would probably ask the board to look at.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask our captain here if there's a procedure that has been worked out with this board. I chaired the Racial Profiling Advisory Board Policy Committee for a number of years. And our experience was we'd get to see the policy maybe just a few days before it was actually finished. And it was very difficult to have any input that was actually showing up in the final policy. What is the way in which this board will actually review something in a timely fashion?
Well, they give us the draft and we have a meeting.
Pardon?
They give us a draft. Usually the draft comes out, at least in the past, with the packet of materials 2 or 3 days in advance, and then we have a discussion.
So once we discuss here, come up with recommendations, do we pass it on to the captain and he passes it to the chief? How do we get our recommendations into the final document?
Well, part of it's informal in the sense that in the past, sometimes the chief has actually been present during these discussions, but there's a discussion about things to consider. Formally, the board would do it in terms of a motion to make a recommendation specifically, and that would be a formal action of the board. And that would be done by motion at the meeting where the item is considered.
So it sounds like we need to have some fairly detailed discussion of some of these policies, promotions being one of them. I'm very concerned about some of the officers that have been promoted, and they have a number of complaints filed against them. How do we have a timely input? Is that going to be something on the agenda? You're going to provide us some ideas? How do we get the process started?
What are you asking, Walt?
Pardon?
What are you asking for?
Time and actual discussion, and not just say, okay, we've received it, but we have to come up with some recommendations. We have to review it and then recommend.
Well,
and that's a process.
It is a process, but you get the policy, the draft, whatever it is, and then we can have a meeting and we can discuss it. And if we need more discussion, we can have more discussion, and we can make recommendations. There's no prohibition against that, but it is a process. And it's
There's a policy, for instance, that, we get it 2 days in advance, we read it, we come here, we start having a discussion, we recognize that it's a lively discussion. We have called emergency meetings before. If we don't want to wait another month, we've called emergency meetings, not necessarily for policies, but it's not outside of our experience to have more than a monthly meeting if it's necessary. But we can review them outside, they're emailed to us, and we can come here and have a conversation, make our recommendation, and the board we can pass it, during that regular meeting.
Those of us who've been on the board for a while will remember that we reviewed the juvenile arrest policy several times in multiple meetings.
Yes.
So that process, and all policies can be amended at almost any time. The review process is just try to keep order in the process, the scheduling is. But if there's any policy that you want reviewed or have a reason for review, you can flag it for review. Yes, sir.
Just some additional information. When these policies that come up for review, they're not within a week or something decided and then re-implemented. I've seen policies take 4 or 5 and sometimes even 6 months before they're republished because of corrections and things that do change. So it's not an immediate thing that, we turn around and put the policy back into place.
And what I've seen, and I know our board members have seen it in the past, is there'll be a Word document or with a red line in it showing suggested changes and all of that, so you can kind of track what's going on. And we've actually handed out copies of the track change document and discussed them. So I think the process is very amenable to a worthwhile review. You got to read it when it comes out, but that's doable.
So Travis, I feel like it's...
Sooner the better. If we were at the end of the process, like you say, it takes months. And if you don't see what recommendations there are for change till the very end, it's very hard to turn that thing around.
Well, I mean, we're kind of belaboring the point now, but the captain and the captains before Captain Easter will send out and have sent out lists of upcoming policies. We sent one out not too long ago that had policies, I think, for the next 6 months or something like that. And if a person on the board has a question about it, they can go and they can look the policies up and say, I want to talk about that one. And so we can then flag it. And we can flag it months in advance, literally, if you choose to do so.
Yeah. As soon as he's notified, it seems like we've been notified fairly early in the process of the review process.
I think we did a 6-month list last time.
And
Walt, I don't understand, I guess, what you're asking. If you're asking about any new policy or every new policy that the police department is looking at implementing, whether the board will review it, I guess I can't answer that.
Well, the answer to that is, I don't think we would ever review every policy.
I mean,
that's not
the ones
possible.
that we ask for.
No.
I think I'm just a little confused on what it is you're asking.
Because the chief in the past has come to us sometimes and said, I would appreciate your input on this, and other times we say, we want our own input on this policy. It's gone both ways.
Great.
When did we last get a list of policies up for renewal that was on our agenda? I don't remember one. Doesn't mean it's not there, or it hasn't been.
The list of policies subject to review
Yeah.
is not on our agenda.
Oh, okay, I thought he said that he would bring them, that
I
were coming up for review.
I don't know, a couple months ago probably, that had the next 6 months or 9 months.
Yeah, it was an email, but I don't know, I mean.
It's not on the actual agenda.
It only shows
Should
up
it
on the
be?
agenda if a member of the
Or-
board says, I would
want to
like
look
to
at it.
review
Oh,
this."
okay.
Typically, what's happened, and I can't say I've done it every time, but I mean, Captain Nicholson or Captain Easler would send out an email, usually to me, I guess, maybe not the entire board, saying, here are the policies up for review. And then I would then forward that email saying, here are the policies, and it'll, be a list that long. And most of them are not matters of any controversy or any particular importance to the board, but some of them may be. And then I say, if anybody wants to review these, let us know. I let me and Captain Easter or Captain Nicholson before him know. That's how we've done it.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on policies?
I have nothing else.
All right.
But you're going to give us an update on vouchers and
Quickly. So that's what I talked about at the beginning of the meeting, was that we are probably about 2 weeks away from being back live on both of those. We plan on having our database set up by the 1st of March for the Lights On program. We have the funds established. We are in contact with them. We're ready to go. We have a SOP written for our car seat program. Working on allocating the funds for that now. We have the community support specialist set up and ready to go. So it's very close.
are parents that are no longer needing an infant seat able to donate? Like through some of the churches or charities in town? Can we help you out?
So if it's like a lot of places, and we've run into this before, I would have to check, but there's a liability there. We can't even take in used toys and animals or stuffed animals as a department around Christmas and stuff like that. Everything has to come new or purchased. Now, I'm not saying that we won't be able to have something set in place if somebody wants to purchase new ones to donate. The problem with that too is it's just there's a shelf life on everything, right? So we want to make sure that there's a constant supply there, but we don't want a big influx of anything and make it work. But we have to take new items, I would guarantee you, if we ever did any type of a...
Well, in lieu of giving a ticket to a mother that doesn't have an infant seat, can you refer to a charity and say, here, we'll get yourself an infant seat rather than write her ticket?
I mean, I can add that in to see if we can hook up with any of them that exist.
We got to have some compassion here in this world. Jennifer, what is the amount of money that's charged by the municipal court for court fees on every ticket?
I don't have that amount. I don't know the court costs without looking.
Over
I can check.
$100.
I can check on that.
All right, let's decide what to do next.
Can I, Jay, I just wanted to, I found the most recent email. It was September 1st, and so we are 6 months from that, so I think we're due for another email on the list of policies that are up for review.
I'll get that. I'll get it out to you.
So September 1st was the email that we received, that last one.
Let's go on. Before we decide whether we're going into executive session, I wanted to tell everybody that Sheila Officer of the Racial Profiling Advisory Board has invited us, or members of the board, of this board, to their April meeting to visit with them. It would not be a meeting of the CRB. It would be just kind of an informational exchange meeting. The meeting, I understand, is on April 20th. She was going to get back with me on the details, but I believe those meetings are at 6:30 p.m. And so I want everybody to know that she has invited members of the board to be there. We can talk about it more next month. For open meetings purposes, if more than 6 of us show up, we have to give notice, okay? I thought I understand it, but that it won't be a meeting of the CRB in a formal sense. But I wanted to share with you that invitation so that you would know. And when she gets back with me with more information, I'll just email that to everybody.
Well, that is a third Thursday, and so 3 of us, if we have a subcommittee, would be meeting at that instead, or I guess it could be before.
You could have an extra long day.
Our last subcommittee was at 4, and we were done.
It was at 4.
Yeah.
So,
At 4.
yeah, so anyway, I wanted to make everybody aware of that invitation, so there you go.
Really?
What is the board's desire with regard to executive session?
Table it for next meeting.
If we do that, what I would suggest we do at the next meeting is that we have the staff report, the abbreviated report on the data set, and then go to executive session so that we can start knocking some of these significant cases out.
Yes, sir.
Because we've been holding one case for now a number of months, and it was one the board was particularly interested in the history of a particular officer. And we keep pushing that case back, and we need to look at that case, and we need to look at some of these other cases. So I would suggest that we try to have an abbreviated public session and then go to executive session and knock some of these out. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Should we plan to stay longer or not?
We could.
I won't be able to do that. On Wednesdays, I'm fine usually like this, but when we meet on Thursdays, I've got another commitment right after that meeting on Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, I stay longer sometimes, but we seem to always butt up against conflict when 6 o'clock gets here, so.
Is this on March 23rd? Is that the date? Is this the date for the next meeting, March 23rd?
I think so, yeah.
I just was clarifying. I don't have it on my calendar yet, okay.
Yes.
March
No.
20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, yeah.
It's the 23rd, okay, thank
So the
you.
next meeting will be March 23rd. Is everybody okay with deferring today's executive session?
Yep.
If so, is there a motion to adjourn?
So, second.
Are there something else besides
Well, we new business.
new business?
You have something new?
I do. I do. Actually, I kind of need help on maybe developing a motion here. So Saturday, I was at the District 2 breakfast, and the chief of police was there, giving a presentation. And during that presentation, he mentioned that he's developing new policies. And I thought, well, maybe we should have a motion on these new policies. But it sounds like, and I don't know if we need one, but do we need a motion to compel the department to bring new policies, or at least inform the board of new policies?
I
Or is that?
think the chief say do it, but if someone wants to make a motion to request, we really can't compel, but to request the department provide us drafts of new policies in advance of their adoption, that'd be fine.
Okay, well, I don't have anything specifically worded for that, but thank you for that. But then it brought up something. So I've not gone to the chief of police directly with things that are concerned, because we have the CRB for that, right? And then, but I know, like when I brought up in an email, like the roller rink thing, I said, like, I'd like to see some of these policies. I think I specifically asked to review maybe the juvenile arrest policy. I don't remember specifically. And then you had indicated that you had already talked to the chief about that. And Odell, kind of the same thing. You chimed in and said, yeah, I already talked to the chief about that. And so I'm curious. So that's one example. And the other example was the woman who brought the case last month. And I remember Jay sent information in advance about the case and said in the email that the chief specifically asked the CRB to look into it. And I don't know how you reported that back to the chief. So should we have, whether it's not a motion or just something internal, that if we're acting on behalf of the CRB with the chief or something, that, like, I don't know how you reported to the chief about what the CRB decided last month on that one. Should the CRB be included or notified about these, if it's CRB business with the chief, that we kind of are kept in the loop?
Here's the background on that. First of all, that we took no action, and so the report to the chief would be made in the statement made in the minutes. There was no specific report, we made no recommendation on that particular case. The question that the chief talked to both Odell and I about after the incident at the roller rink, the chief initially called me and said, I'm thinking about having you folks review that. And then we had a subsequent conversation. He says, it's been turned over to the sheriff's department for an independent review, so it's premature. And then the chief said, and that's why I said, for example, there's a question about a new policy on off-duty officers. The chief has said, I want to look at that and perhaps create a different policy on that, and he will bring that to the board. That's how that happened. And I think you and I may have had a discussion by email that the chief also identified the question of Axon video and whatever. And he told me that he was anticipating a budget request because off-duty officers, they don't have cameras for them, and they don't have the budget. So that's one of the things that may be as part of the policy, which he would then present to us on how to consider it. So I think the notion is all of those items will come before the board in that context.
Okay. Well, I think if we knew in advance, like in this formal setting, then those of us who kind of like keep track say, oh, wait, back in January, the chief said that we would have a new policy on cameras for off-duty folks. And on that topic, if the department is so short-staffed, then there should be extra cameras. I mean, I'm just curious about that. But
you understand that like detectives and a lot of non-patrol supervisors don't have cameras.
Right.
So the off-duty officers can include those folks too.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So there's not a universal way to cover.
Yeah. Well, and thanks for that clarification, right? So if all of this had come up, this is what the chief said, and we're going to track this as a board, then like I would have understood, and I wouldn't have asked a silly question.
Well, it's not a silly question. I understand it.
And I will add that when I spoke to the chief, that was not in regards to the Citizens Review Board. That was a group of pastors in the city that were offering some insight. So I was not acting as a Citizens Review Board member.
Okay.
I was acting as a clergy.
So there's really what?
Same person, different hat.
Is there a need for clarification on this, or none of us just reach out and we, as a CRB member, everything with the chief is just done here?
No, when this was originally set up, when the board was originally set up, Chief Ramsey's idea would be there would be a lot of more informality contact between him and the board. And of course, Chief Ramsey's original idea, I think, was that he could meet with us and discuss with us a lot of subjects, only to discover the Kansas Open Meetings Act and the requirement that personnel matters be treated in executive session and all that, which slowed that process down dramatically, because that wasn't his experience from where he was from. But the board was set up with the notion that individual members of the board can interact too.
Okay.
So my interaction with the new chief, Chief Sullivan, has been relatively limited, but he has called me.
Okay.
And I did. And when he called me, he said, "I'm calling about something that I may want the board to consider." And I think he was maybe have jumped the gun, quite frankly, because I think he was thinking about us having a review of that particular incident. And then he decided that he would refer it to the sheriff's department for investigation. And well, that's not our deal. We don't get involved in that process at that time.
Right.
So that's kind of where we left it.
And I would assume he reads the minutes. from the meeting.
Somebody does.
You ought to get them.
Maybe from the.
Yeah.
He gets them?
I would assume he gets them. Yes. Yes, he
Okay.
does. Yes.
Good. All right, well, thank you for letting me ask about that.
I have a question. Any indication about Jensen Hughes' review of?
I got a call from, is it Sydney Roberts, I think, was her name? She called me 2 or 3 weeks ago with a final question about board process and said they were finalizing their draft. So I'd expected it out by now, but I don't know.
I was curious. I know. Several of us was interviewed.
I believe it to be in process, but I am not aware of a draft being issued.
I have a question while we're kind of covering a number of bases. Could you historically give me some idea of how many cases that this board has reviewed that have been reversed from what the police department concluded?
Well, first of all, we don't reverse. We only...
Okay, recommendation that they
suggestions.
do something different than what they did.
Well, the biggest example is the texting case.
Texas case.
That is the flagship example of one. The other examples have not been significant in the context of disagreement. I know the board in the past has expressed to the chief, the past chief, on at least 2 or 3 occasions that we were uncomfortable or disagreed in some fashion with the discipline imposed. Understanding that on at least one case, we felt the discipline was more than was necessary. So it goes both ways. But in most instances, we have concurred or made no recommendations.
So basically batting 1,000 then. I mean, we hear one side of the story, we say, okay.
No, I disagree completely. I disagree completely. 95% of the cases reviewed are based on primary evidence of the Axon video. And you can see what happened. And here.
Yeah.
And so it is unfair to say, completely unfair to say, that it is biased in that context. Also understand that we are a review board that is not an adjudicatory body, and we are not conducting a trial. We are trying to assess whether the process is working or not. That is our mission.
How do we know that without the input from the claimant, the person that made the complaint?
The claimant has the ability to appear if they choose to do so.
They also have the ability to set up an appointment and watch the Axon video themselves. From what I understand, they're able to do that. They're able to do that with the sheriff's department also.
Right.
That when they make their complaint, they can go in. So we're not seeing anything that they haven't already had the ability to see themselves. And I don't know that there would be additional information outside of, because the Axon video, it starts 30 seconds before they have any contact with the citizen, and this board is not an adversarial board against the police.
Well, of course
right?
not. But we are supposedly a citizen review board. It means that citizens need input to our process.
And a citizen...
And they need to be invited, otherwise they don't even know we're even discussing their case.
The citizens, I mean, quite frankly, Walt, citizens have a responsibility too. They are told of our review, they know this process exists, they receive notification of it. If there is a concern by a citizen needs to tell us. If they tell us, we will make the review and we will listen to them. Okay. That process is available today. Now, unfortunately, we don't get many citizens' requests.
Right.
But we invite them. And so that process, I think, is available to work. It may not be perfect, but it's available to work.
And we are citizens as well, right? And we are non-biased opinions reviewing a case, correct?
Well, and the Axon video, and so any evidence that's presented to us, or evidence is not the right word because but anything that's presented to us on a complaint is available to the citizen already. That we're not being given anything that they haven't already had access to.
We've had over 245 complaints from citizens, only 4% sustained. Look at the data from each month, and it shows quite a few of the internal complaints, either monitoring or, something is done to help the officer change their behavior. But if you only sustain 4% of the citizen complaints, it raises a major red flag in my mind. And I'm very concerned that we have now very few of the people actually know that they have any right to even come to this board. I'm not sure that's ever called or told to them. That's why in the motion I made today, I asked for us to invite them, make sure they're aware that we're going to look at their case.
Walt, that process is already provided for. They are invited. They have the ability to appear. If they choose not to, we will still review the case if we've made the decision to review. So there are cases we are reviewing where a citizen has made a complaint, we've reviewed it. There are cases where a citizen has made a complaint and said they want to appear, but then they don't appear. But we're still going to review those complaints, and we do. All I can tell you is that this process is open for the citizens to participate in. We are here to listen. But it is a two-sided process. If someone has a gripe or a grievance, come tell us. That's how we solve these problems.
Do you know how difficult it is to even find this board on the city's website, let alone a phone number to call?
Well, everybody who gets a complaint or files a complaint receives a letter from the police department that includes a reference to our board with a phone number and an email address. The information is provided. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, wait, by the way,
Good to see you.
you need to be paying attention.
You too, I missed you.
I'm here.